Like any other self-respecting lover of good animated projects, I have become a massive fan of Arcane, and within moments of turning on its second and sadly final season, I knew that it wasn't just good, but that it was truly something special. From making decisive character and narrative choices that work on both video game fans and the layman, to having stunning animation, the emotion behind the story is just allowed to be ramped up with every chance the writers get. But what exactly does Arcane do right? Why is this show in particular so popular, and how is it able to bring in viewers who were never fans of League of Legends? Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the Talking Sentient Sandwich, and this isn't a review. At time of recording, I've yet to see the last act of Season 2, but don't worry. I won't discuss anything specific that happens aside from saying the animation itself is cool, and showing clips of what has already been released in the trailers. Once I do see it, I'll have a full examination of Season 2 a little bit after. Yet for now, I couldn't help but join in on the Arcane bandwagon, because my goodness, this show just goes from strength to strength. And in this video, I want to talk about the 6 things that Arcane does right. And though I won't give any specific spoilers away for Season 1 either, if you haven't seen this and like to watch a show blind, I would pause this video now. I mean, I'm not going anywhere. Yet for Season 1 in particular, I am ashamed to admit it took almost a year after its release for me to get around to it. Everyone sang its praises, and I never doubted that, but I just wasn't interested in a show about League of Legends characters, and the process that I had to go through to eventually watch what everyone was telling me was one of the best shows out there took a surprisingly long time. But guess what? They were right. There was also an element of spite, because at my core, I am sadly a spiteful person, and I wanted to find a reason to not watch this show. And the more that people around me told me that I needed to see it, the more I skirted around it. And that's especially true when someone calls it the best animated series ever, which just makes me think they clearly had never seen The Last Airbender. However, they might have been onto something with that. I'm still not sure if it's better than The Last Airbender, and other shows like Gravity Falls and Adventure Time will always hold a special place in my heart, yet I'm calling it now, because Arcane is definitely up there among the greatest of all time, even among some of the best animes, which is a whole nother can of worms that I will not be opening, at least not today. But getting back to what Arcane does right, and it wasn't just that I had no interest in the characters beforehand, I simply didn't know who any of them were. I haven't played 1 second of League, and I don't plan on it. I'm not much of a gamer, but when I am, it's to play a single-player linear story. So the first thing about Arcane that I want to highlight to show what it does right is how it brings in more viewership than just the video game fanbase. In fact, from what I can tell with the surface-level research I did, it seems like the show's fanbase and the game's fanbase are quite distinct. I'm sure there's plenty of overlap and people who've become interested in the video game because of the show and vice versa, but the way that this stands on its own without needing to feed off of any nostalgia or a pre-cooked audience is amazing. It has that kind of delicate writing that does have nostalgia or Easter eggs, but isn't reliant on it, introducing multiple champions, as League of Legends calls them, naturally, without it feeling like the writers are jamming too many characters into our face. And the video game people are mixed in with original characters so that people like me have no clue who is important. Until, minor spoilers, around episode 2, I realized that the 2 stone statues fighting at the end of the intro looked a lot like grown-up versions of Vi and Powder. That's when I began to suspect that this show was going to go in directions that I could only dream of. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because I haven't even finished talking about how the show introduces everything. Fantasy stories all have the challenge of introducing the audience to a complex world and a handful of characters in their introductions, and often fail right from the get-go, but Arcane had an even harder time getting me invested because, like I mentioned before, my spiteful brain didn't want to get invested. But before I knew it, I began to get invested in Powder and Vi, wanting to see them and everyone around them succeed. And I saw every tropey character as if I could see through the Matrix, and I figured I could guess exactly where the show was going. But wouldn't you know it, the writers of the show are really good, because that's exactly what they wanted me to think. With every expectation that might form around where a character is going to go or how the narrative will develop further, it's like the filmmakers had anticipated that line of thought and built something into the show to acknowledge or even combat it. Which leads me to the second thing that Arcane does right. When bringing in all of those non-gaming viewers, who are all there from online hype, it has to live up to that hype. And of course, this and everything stated in this video is my opinion and subjective, but to me, it lived up to the hype and then some. mainly coming down to the masterful writing. The rare choices in the script that can be seen as a mistake will eventually come back around and become important or impactful. And I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that no matter how high your expectations are for this show, it takes those expectations, subverts them, and then blows whatever you had in your mind out of the water. I wish I could talk in specifics, but I'm sticking by my own arbitrary rule of keeping this relatively spoiler-free. Although one thing I can discuss, as I mentioned earlier, is the animation, which happens to be the third thing that Arcane does right. I'd heard it was beautiful, and I was able to appreciate its mixture of 2D, 3D, and well-implemented CG within seconds of flicking it on, and the effort put into that got some nods of approval from me. Yet it wasn't until the show got to some of its standout sequences that I fully realized what everyone was talking about, blending music and animation in this beautifully cinematic way that just made me remember why I love animated projects in the first place. There was some article going around saying that this was the most expensive animated show ever, and I haven't looked into whether or not that's true, but even if it is, typically I bring a fact like that up to complain about wasted funds going places that they shouldn't. Yet for this, you can see every dollar on the screen. Conversation scenes are given a dynamic camera and powerful composition to fit the layered writing, which might be a point in and of itself, but I'm not there yet. I'm still not done worshipping the animation, because as far as the action is concerned, there's this fluid and impactful motion that always has a tangible sense of weight and brutality. It's not any sense of realism, but the punches and hits are depicted in a way that you can almost feel the pain in a real way. And beyond fistfights, there are multiple movie-quality sequences in almost every episode that are genuinely stunning, and that's even more true with Season 2. But moving on to the fourth and fifth things that Arcane does right, both of which somewhat go hand in hand, having to do with the writing. And I may have hinted at this earlier, but it's just exceptionally and excessively layered, to the point that I have watched this show all the way through 4 times now, and I'm sure I still missed a dozen cases of foreshadowing and story hints. And that's without even bringing up all the video game Easter eggs that sailed way over my head. I can't confidently say that everything matters because I didn't make an Excel spreadsheet charting how every line feeds into one another, something I genuinely considered before the lazy side of my brain took over and saw it as insane, but that's how much faith I had in how tightly interwoven the script is. Without that research, which would have taken months, seriously, what was I thinking? But I can still reliably say that every line feels like it matters, simply because everything is written with as much layered meaning as possible. Reminding me of some of the best writing out there, Arcane makes sure to grip the audience with mysteries and puzzles you're just one step away from figuring out. And the moment you do find those answers, it's on to the next mystery box. So let me tell you, J.J. Abrams would be proud. And not just that, the writing is also paced to perfection, allowing each episode to hold the viewer's interest for its entire runtime, not just from mystery boxes, but from a flawless synchronization of rising and falling action. Arcane isn't one of those miniseries that are essentially just one big movie chopped up into episodes, which do have their place, and I know plenty of shows like that I enjoy, but having each episodic adventure build off of each other and culminate with every act is objectively better. Of course, every episode follows a clear structure and formula that can eventually be recognized, but the show also extends a character interaction if it could be more dramatic, and rushes through another if it might be boring. That freedom in its flowing narrative allows the writers to tell the precise story that they want to. So long as the show is able to get through enough plot to feel like an act is eventful, then the filmmakers can do whatever they want. And for the sixth and final thing that Arcane does right, which only pertains to the second season, and that being its release. And this is an obvious one, but the 3-act release schedule for season 2 is inspired. Netflix, I guess, found their binging niche because they've always fully released their shows. Something I have never complained about because I'm one of those people who loves to binge something in one sitting, but there's also nothing worse for a show's marketing than for it to be dropped all at once and promptly forgotten. And I'll happily raise my hand and say that I would have loved to just get all of season 2 at once, and I was upset when episode 3 ended and I had to wait a week to watch more, but that is how watching TV is supposed to be. I should be counting down the seconds until the next episode is released and wanting to talk to anyone and everyone about my theories, because that kind of excitement is how something gains word of mouth, more viewership, and maybe even become an online phenomenon. But what's your thoughts on what Arcane does right? Did you ignore the minor spoiler warning and now I've kinda ruined the show for you? Leave a comment and let me know. Also, it was not intended to be, but this video kinda turned into a similarly structured video to what I made last week, even down to points 4 and 5 being similar enough to bundle under one topic, but hey, if it ain't broke. As always, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe for weekly video essays and reviews, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.